Good morning, invisible friends. My name is Reynaldo Aguiar, although my full name is Reynaldo J. Aguiar Marcano. And today is July 8th, 2025, and it's about 11 a.m. Central Time. And I am currently located at one of my houses at 26714 Valleyside Drive, Katy, Texas 77494. So today, first of all, I want to apologize for the disconnect. The last couple of days, I've been working on a project I'm working, and I was occupied with that a little bit. Okay. But for today, I have a session that is packed with tips and information. And the session is designed to help you, or aimed at helping you get these tips that could be valuable very quickly. So, as we've done in the last few times, I'm going to start with the Guess Who section, but this time it's not a single individual. I'm going to include multiple individuals in this Guess Who segment, okay? So to start, let me introduce you to Dana White, the UFC guy. He's super prominent in this network, very prominent, a lot of data points in the Geo Index. And to be honest, I don't know, what, obviously it's a business, and there's money involved. But beyond the money, I don't really understand what could be the strategic advantage of this. What is the angle? What is the surveillance angle? I don't see it. But I imagine there must be a surveillance angle, because otherwise they would invest the money somewhere else. But I can tell you, he is heavily marked in the index, and a lot of the properties related to the franchise itself are marked in the index as well. When I say the index, Elon Musk's Geo Index, which is the same index that Diosdado Cabello and El Cartel de los Soles and Elon Musk and Travis Kalanick are using to commit different types of crimes. So in that same database, Dana White and the UFC franchise are heavily marked. And of course, I didn't mention this before, but this session is part of the series of videos that I've titled Rapid Fire Tips for Law Enforcement, and part of the campaign that I'm advancing to bring Diosdado to justice and bring Diosdado to the US. It's important to say that. So that's the first data point that I wanted to offer you as part of this Guess Who segment, okay? So for the next part of this segment, I have a few individuals that are related to the IRS. So there's a few individuals that are related to the IRS. Some of them don't work at the IRS anymore, but they're heavily tied to the IRS, and I would say their importance comes from that. So these are in a folder that you can see in the, so if you go to the channel, to the YouTube channel, click on more links on the description, and there is a link that says archive. Within that, there is a folder that says US government officials, and within that, there's a folder that says IRS. So there you will find, for example, Douglas O'Donnell, okay? So Douglas O'Donnell is an interesting character because I think he was the director at some point. And this is a very high ranking level position. I think it's appointed by, don't quote me on this, like I don't recall really, but if it's not appointed by the president, like it's almost at that level. Like it's something that requires a lot of approval to get that position, right? And he was appointed to that position. And before that, I think he was the head of the enforcement department of the IRS. So this would be basically the department that processes the Form 211s, the same Form 211s that I've been sending for almost 9 months at this point, reporting multiple individuals. The department that handles those forms used to be directed by Douglas O'Donnell. Imagine that. So if anybody reports any player from this network to the IRS, they had zero chance of succeeding because Douglas O'Donnell would have stopped. As he had been stopping, he stopped. He's not there anymore, but he stopped a lot of my submissions. So he's flagged, of course. But at some point, I think in March 2025, we're now in July. So this was more than 4 months ago. I sent a Form 211 to Douglas O'Donnell to report Douglas O'Donnell, right? It's a bit of irony of that. But anyhow, here in this PDF document, in this archive, so the archive of the channel, not to be confused with the archive of the investigative archive, which is a different, bigger archive. But on the archive of the channel, you could find this PDF that has the USPS tracking numbers for the 2 copies of this form reporting Douglas O'Donnell, the IRS that I sent. Okay, you can get it from there. When I reported him, I remember I posted this on the website, and immediately, I think like a couple of hours after, they sent a series of people to harass me at my house. Phil Denning came with a bicycle. The other guy from the house that is like 200 feet away came on the bicycle as well. Like, they started doing this thing that they do, responding to the posts, basically. But that was nothing compared, and I'm saying this because those small events of harassment, they weren't small, but they were nothing compared to when I reported this other person, Charles P. Reddick. When I reported him and posted him on the website, the harassment was immediate and was super, super high in terms of intensity. Multiple planes flew above my home to the point that I documented that on the website. So this was on February 21st, 2025, between 1:30 and 2:30 p.m. The planes flew altitude above my home, multiple planes during that hour. And the address, I'm going to give the address, so if authorities ever see this video, they can check which planes were flying above my home. Even if they probably turned off the transponders, but I imagine there must be a way to check this. They must have taken off from somewhere, and given how much fuel they can carry, probably it's not that difficult to narrow it down. So who could it have been? Anyhow, so this was, the planes flew over my home, was on February 21st, 2025, between 1:30 p.m. and 2:30 p.m. Central Time. And the address of that house is 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. That it's in Lake Point Estates, that small gated community subdivision that is controlled or was controlled by Phil Denning. Okay, so Chamberlain, okay, so Charles P. Reddick, and I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing the last name correctly, he was the director of the IRS before O'Donnell. He was a predecessor, basically. I'm not sure if it was exactly before or if there was somebody in the middle between them, but he was a director before, okay? He retired from the IRS, and then he went to work for this accounting tax firm called Chamberlain, and the second part is impossible for me to pronounce. It's spelled HRDLICKA. Dika, I don't know. So he's like a prominent person in that firm, or was, I don't know. And this firm is huge. Like, it's a big firm. They have offices in Los Angeles, in other cities in Houston, in New York. They're big. They're super big. And this firm is super flagged in the index. It's like the Kilpatrick Townsend law firm, but for tax lawyers, something like that. And when I saw that, I understood. Like, I understood the multiple ruses that they designed to harm people with the IRS, to weaponize the IRS. But it seems to me like it's a two-pronged approach that they have there. So they have one part of the IRS to harass people with audits and with legal action from the IRS. And they have another set of people there, like O'Donnell or Anna Hergy, to obstruct justice. So they are not investigated and nothing happens to them. Of course, I imagine that if anybody comes across this information from the real law enforcement, they won't let the bad guys win by obstructing justice, I imagine. But anyhow, so the data about Charles Reddick is also in this folder. And I'm mentioning the thing with the planes, the level of harassment, and making that comparison, because from that, what I interpreted is that Charles Reddick is way more important even than O'Donnell, who was the director of the IRS at that point. He was retired. Maybe he doesn't have official power, but he has other kind of powers because they reacted in this strong way. So that's that. Yes. Okay. Another thing that I wanted to mention in this segment are the Best Buy stores. I touched on this directly and mentioned a couple of things before, but I want to be very clear this time that the Best Buy stores, all of them, are super dangerous to society because they're basically a way to insert bugs into your home. So, they have Amazon and they have eBay and they do it online that way, but they also need to cover the set of the population that prefer to buy things on the stores. There's people that just because of preferences or because of their age group or whatever, cultural reasons, they prefer to buy things physically at the stores. They prefer that experience over the line experience. So they have to cover that as well. And they cover that with Best Buy and Future Shop in Canada. It's the same thing. Both chains are super flagged and there are ways to insert bugs into your home. And if I count how many bugs they've inserted into my home this way with Best Buy, I would spend hours counting the things. And from the data in the GeoIndex, it seems like this operation is really controlled by the Iranians, same as eBay. So it's like they wanted to take the online shopping and the physical shopping as well when it comes to electronics and computer parts. So they want to control all that, which makes sense given what they do. Okay, so that's on the big players kind of stage. And now these also are big players, but not in the same way. So now I want to talk a little bit about the Molero clan, the Molero family that we touched on the last session. So I created a folder. I put it under Diosdado Cabello because they're working directly for Diosdado Cabello, right? Like they're working on advancing Diosdado Cabello's interest in Katy and in Florida. So I put them under Diosdado Cabello. And I collected pictures of siblings themselves and also close friends of the siblings that are working with them and then are also agents and are also marked. So first, and this, I have to run some things through the pipeline that I haven't run. So this, take it with a grain of salt, but it seems to me at this point, like if somebody asked me, who do you think is a ringleader within this Molero clan? I would think it's this guy. His name is David or David in Espanol, Molero. And it seems like he's the ringleader in a way. Also, you can see a photo here of this is from left to right. Juan Pablo is this bald guy. Humberto in Spanish is this guy. And the third one from left to right is David or David Molero, this one with the polarized sunglasses. And this one over here is, what's her name? Isabel Molero. This photo is old. They were much younger than they are right now in this photo. But that guy, David or David, looks like this today or close to this. Like this photo is probably 2 years old. Okay. Also, here you have all the 7 of them. So there's 7 siblings. And funny enough, in this, it's in Spanish, but in this caption, if you read it, they're saying that they're complicit, literally. They say that we're all complicit. And they call themselves, the translation would be like the gang of the 7, right? Because there are 7 siblings. That's pretty accurate, to be honest. In a funny way, but it's accurate. So anyhow, you can see all of them there, and you can see the names. They're tagged in that photo. Let me see what else I have here. So this is again, I think this is David or David Molero. This photo is probably, I would say, 4 to 5 years old. And this one is Francisco Castillo, that prominent SEBIN agent that I've mentioned multiple times in different instances. the one that has the phone number that only differs by 2 digits from the phone number of the landscaper that killed all my trees. This is Francisco Castillo. Ironically, like when he was a baby or a small child, my father was his pediatrician. So he's known my family for, I don't know, 40 something years. And then he turns around and does this thing. It's really sad to see how crypto, Bitcoin, can change people and make them do unthinkable things. So that's Francisco. So this is Marcos Castillo. Another Castillo is a prominence marker, by the way, at least in Katy. So Marcos Castillo was working with Francisco Castillo and extracting information from me and on those card games on Wednesdays. It went on for years. And I honestly didn't see it. I didn't see it until maybe 2 years ago. Okay, so this one is, let me show you this one first. So in this photo, that's Patricia Rojas on the right, on the left, sorry, on your left hand. The lady with the dress with flowers or print. Her name is Patricia Rojas, and she was married to Francisco Castillo. So they were husband and wife, and she's an agent as well. And all of this is documented on the website. Like Patricia has a house with a trampoline antenna. The trampoline antenna is marked in the index, not only the house, but the antenna itself. And the brother is Jose Roberto Rojas Sanchez, also an agent. And Patricia, mentioning her in the context of the Moleros, because Patricia is super tight with the Moleros. Like she spends Christmas at their home, and they all. She once showed me a photo. It was weird, but she once showed me a photo where they were all dressed with these kind of pajamas, like Christmas pajamas. But these are grown-ups, all of them. It was like 10 people, all of them with matching pajamas, and Patricia was in that thing. So she spent Christmas evening with them, and she wore the pajamas. So she's like part of the family, basically. So that close she is to the clan. And of course, by extension, Francisco Castillo, because he was married to Patricia. And also, this was systematically clustered. Although the photo is a bit blurry, that person is a 7 agent that in one occasion, he released 2 attack dogs and directed one of the dogs towards me as I was running in the park. And this is documented in the website. Mentioning this because it could bring liability cluster if this person can be located. So I wanted to mention that. Okay, and in the context of that, I also want to direct you to the form211.org website where you can see this form. In this form, on page 1035, at the end of 1034 and 1035, you will see these small clusters that are usually 2, 3, 4, 5 individuals. These are clusters of siblings, okay? Because this is the thing. This is the thing that they repeat, that the network, this criminal network repeats this pattern. They recruit all the siblings. And I understand the principle. It's probably loyalty, all those things. But it's also an Achilles heel because it makes detection easy. So what law enforcement would need to do basically is to find siblings that are all marked in the index, and this is trivial to do. Now that spyhell.org is available and the data is public. So I'm just going to go through the clusters quickly, and the way they're numbered is they're structured in a way. All these siblings clusters start with S, as in Sam, for sibling, and then they have a second letter, which is the position of the cluster, and the clusters are ranked in terms of liability, what I believe could be legal liability in the US. And then the number, it signifies the ranking of the sibling within that sibling's cluster. For example, this SA cluster is one of the clusters that I perceive that could have highest liability in the US. And within that cluster, the top individual in terms of liability will be Ender Gonzalez, okay? Followed by Nestor Gonzalez, followed by Ciro Gonzalez. So those are, for example, the Gonzalez. We also have the Perez, Miguel Perez, Eddie Perez, Erika Perez, the Troconis, Jorge Troconis, Javier Troconis, Alejandra Troconis, the Sanchez, and all of them are documented in the website and why they are flagged. Besides being marked in the index and having properties or living in properties that are marked in the index, but because of interactions that they had where they were working for the network. Ana Linda Sanchez and Gustavo Sanchez, they're the son and daughter of that doctor that gave my medical records to Diosdado Cabello, basically, in the 7, and then passed them to Elon Musk, Travis Kalanick, Bezos, and those guys. Then we have the Sanchez, Marisa de Sanchez, William Sanchez, Maria Sanchez, the Barbosas, Benjamin Barbosas, and his brothers. He has 2 brothers. The Gonzalez, Nelio Gonzalez, Jose Gonzalez, and Nelio Gonzalez. Jose Alberto Inciarte, this is the one that was basically working with Hidalgo Martinez, working for Piero Midyar to steal the classifieds website. And the Anzolas, Luis Anzola. This, I will probably promote him a little bit. Actually, this is, yeah, sorry, I made a mistake here. He was actually, so this cluster of the Anzolas is the one that has the highest liability, I think, because Luis Anzola works for Starlink. And he asked me for a referral for Google to try to get a job at Google. And there were a lot of interactions over the years with Luis and then Otilio Anzola and Carolina Anzola. But this cluster will probably supersede the SA cluster. So this should be SA, but I didn't move it. I made a mistake and didn't move it. But it was the first cluster that I added. That's why I ended at the end. So yeah, so those are the siblings. And like the pattern there, all of them have something in common, and also something in common with the Molero cluster and the Key cluster, Jocelyn Key and the brothers. That is that all of them come from the oil industry in Venezuela. And that's why I know them for so long, so many years, is because we all grew up in the same environment, okay? We went to the same school. So this was it's hard to explain to people outside of that cultural bubble, because it was a situation that is unique. I haven't seen that set up anywhere else. The setup was that the oil company, so it was the oil company was controlled by the government, okay? And the oil company it had so much money and so much resources, of course, because it was producing oil, that it had its own ecosystem. Imagine a neighborhood where all the houses are owned by the oil company, okay? And by neighborhood, I mean an area that could have 10,000 people, 12,000 people, huge area. So they had these like settlements in that area, and each settlement had a country club, a golf course, its own clinic, so that workers and the family of the workers could go to the clinic. It is its own school, its own high school, and all those things were operated by the company, like were owned by the company. So the company employed teachers, doctors. That's why my dad worked for the company, because he was a doctor, and my mom was a teacher for the school. And of course, it employed the core personnel, which were like engineers and other things like that. So all of us grew up in that environment. We went to the same school. We played together when we were kids. And basically, to make the story short, what happened, because of the political events in the country, there was a strike. And at that point, I was employed by the company. I was an engineer in that company. Like I had graduated from university and I was working for the company, working on gas compression plants, on turbines, basically. So there was a strike and they fired all of us. Like they fired, I don't know, the company had 40,000 employees. They fired, say, 35,000. Everybody basically was fired. And so the parents of all these people that back then were kids like me, I was maybe 21, 22 years old. All of us, we were around that age. But I was already working, like I already had graduated from university and I was working for the company, while I think some of them were still finishing their degrees. So anyhow, they fired everybody. All of their parents were fired. My mother was fired. I was fired. And then the government took real control politically of the country and of the company. But what I guess what I'm trying to say is that the sad part is that what happened at the end, what I'm seeing, right, is that Diosdado Cabello basically fired the parents, and then the children, who were the children of those marriages, ended up working for Diosdado Cabello committing crimes. To me, that's I can't wrap my head around that concept. Like, I would never work for Diosdado Cabello, no matter how much money. I would never, like, besides the fact that what he's doing is criminal and all that, but he fundamentally, I want to say destroyed, but he fundamentally impacted the lives of my parents. For principle, I would not work for him. Anyhow, that's just me. These people, obviously, they went all in. So now the children of that generation are here in the US committing crimes for Diosdado Cabello. I think that's the irony, the biggest irony of all this. Anyhow, no, sorry. The biggest irony is that I got the geo index. That has to be the biggest irony. Anyhow, moving on. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about kind of a couple of rounds that I did recently. I promised in the previous video that I would talk about the water park round. And then I did another one yesterday. It was short, but it was very productive. So to give context, I'm going to talk with the yesterday's one, so July 7th. To give context about that, I went on a small mission. I wanted to get data on the landscapers. To show you what I mean, let me open the map here. So this is where I am located right now, 26714 Valley Side Drive. And this is the park where I used to run with Penelope Suarez. Now, in this park, let me start by saying, well, all those times she took me there to run, she picked the places where we would run. And in all those instances, there were always these landscapers. So they pose as landscapers and are working on cutting the grass on this huge park. It's a big park, okay? But it's funny because these landscapers were basically harassing me as I was running. Like, they were trying to intercept me. It was comical at some point. Like, the whole thing, don't get me wrong, it was a bit stressful, but at some point it turned into a game. Like, I would do things to evade them, and then they would do things to try to trick me. They would do things like they would hide behind a hill, like a small hill. So I could not see that the landscaper was there. So I was running, and as I was bordering the hill, he would turn on the machine and then they start chasing me. Things like that. And then the goal of that was, they weren't trying to harm me. They were trying to clone my cell phone and get the cookies so that they could intercept the traffic and then get my emails and everything. And to listen in on the conversations, the technical conversations that I was having with Penelope Suarez. I've known for a long time that the landscapers are a fundamental part of this operation. And using technology that I developed, I've come to realize that some of the most prominent agents of the SEBIN actually work as landscapers. Think about that. And it makes sense. The person that I would least suspect, and this might be cultural, but here in the US, or say here in Texas, the people that are working as landscapers, and I don't mean this as it's not a racial comment, please, but I have to say, most of the people working in the industry are immigrants from the south of the border, from the south side of the border. And you wouldn't feel threatened by a landscaper because you would think this is a person that is just an immigrant that is just coming here just recently and is trying to advance. You wouldn't suspect that this is a high-profile SEBIN agent working for Diosdado Cabello. But that's the case in some instances. The landscapers. So the landscapers have a base in this park. It's the place where they put the equipment, and it's this place over here. So what I did, I drove over there, and you can see the cars parked in here. This is a satellite photo from Google Maps. So I went there, and yes, all those cars are part of this. And I even found one that is very prominent parked in there. This Jeep with plate WMW0428. It's a very prominent agent. And he was there. Okay, so building on that, I got into the enclosed area, basically. Because, of course, they're going to park, the most prominent agents are going to park their cars inside where they cannot be photographed because there's a wall. But the gate was open, and I didn't do this on purpose. I made a mistake and turned on the wrong side of the road and ended up inside of the parking area that they have there. Of course, when I realized my mistake, I turned around and I left. But the whole thing was captured by the cameras. Now, this place is marked in the index, heavily marked. And I don't know, I have to run experiments with this idea, but I'm going to mention it in case it's something. And if somebody's listening to these videos or watching, maybe they can experiment with that as well. And if you have more resources or more time than me, maybe you can get there before I can get there. But it occurred to me the following. This I want to say, I haven't experimented with this, so I have no proof. It's just an idea, okay? But sometimes these ideas pan out. So that's why I'm mentioning it. I saw a couple of things that seem could be a pattern, and if they are patterns, could maybe be traceable using imagery detection, as I'm doing. So one thing is that if you look for, first of all, remember this. Look at this, where the landscapers are, and look at these two cylindrical structures here. These are like water tanks, okay? And so see, there's two of them. This place is heavily marked in the index. This place where the landscapers park their cars. And this structure on top has these small dots. You see the dots in the image? I imagine, like, I haven't been on top of it, but I remember when I worked for the oil company, I remember that structures like that, where you keep things like oil or even rice, they have to have a venting mechanism so the thing doesn't explode under pressure if the temperature rises, for example. So it could be a venting, those could be vents or venting mechanisms. But, like the way they're distributed, and it could also be a barcode, like a kind of a QR code in a way. The position or the number of the things, of the vents, of the small dots, could have a meaning. Color. And the reason I thought of this is because in the last session, we saw the discount tire on Cinco Ranch, which we know is very important, and it's heavily marked in the index, and it's under 24/7 heavy surveillance. And now I suspect that's where they installed the sensors. Next to the discount tire, so the discount tire is here. Right next to it, again, we see two cylindrical structures, more or less the same color, and they have the dots on the top, but the dots are different. It's not the same number of dots, and it's not the same pattern. But I guess what caught my attention is that right next to these two very important operational locations, there are these two cylindrical structures to keep water or whatever it is that they're keeping there, or somebody's keeping there, right next to these highly marked locations. Okay? And these structures are very tall. So, it could have multiple advantages. Besides being a marker, a land marker, it could also be to be used as an observation post. Cameras, I don't know. It could have other technical advantages. It could be an antenna. It could be anything. I don't know. But it caught my attention that these two places that came into view in the last two sessions for very important reasons both of them have two of these cylindrical shaped structures next to it. It could be a thing. So and I'm going to experiment with the idea and I will report back what I find, but I'm going to tell you what my plan is. I'm going to do satellite imagery analysis at planet scale to see which clusters can my system identify, different colors of these structures, different number of dots, different orientations. They seem to have these white lines. One of them always align with, or both of them seem to align here with basically with the ladder. Let's see if that holds in the other one. So this one aligns with the ladder. Huh. It doesn't seem to hold. This one doesn't have it in this ladder. So there is a ladder on this side, but it doesn't have the line, right? There seems to be a ladder on this one. Anyhow, it could be. It could be that that line also has a meaning. And it's not a shadow, because if it was a shadow, the other one would have it. Yeah. But I don't know, something to think about. That could mean something. And risking to state the obvious, having these foreign unregistered agents committing crimes next to a water supply doesn't seem safe, doesn't seem like something that is a good idea. They could contaminate that water, for example. And I'm saying this for both locations, for this one and the one next to the discount tire. So that's the landscapers. Okay, so with that, I'm going to switch to another topic. And this, I'm going to be careful not to say much because I don't want to give away technology. But 2 sessions ago, I was thinking out loud. And it's interesting. I watch the videos and I see that I'm analyzing the thing on the fly. I don't know. It makes me worry a little bit because I don't want to make mistakes. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that if you see that I'm analyzing something on the fly, take it with a grain of salt, because obviously I haven't had a lot of time to think about it. And I may say something that may not be completely accurate or maybe completely wrong. But anyhow, I was watching that video in which I was analyzing the bouncing of signals off the satellites. And when I built the demo to find the satellite where you can bounce the signal to hit whatever target you want. And then in that session, I started thinking about how could we work backwards on that problem to eliminate the houses that simply are not able to transmit at all during a given period of time, a time window. And the idea is to eliminate candidates so you can concentrate efforts on the ones that are able, at least, to transmit. And if you try to eavesdrop, well, only eavesdrop on those. It would make your teams more effective. So I built on that idea, and I actually built a demo myself. I built a small system that allows me to pick up some signals. And here's where I'm not going to give much details because I don't want them to know what I can do or what I cannot do. But I can pick up some things. Let's put it that way. And I have successfully picked up and decrypted small segments of things. And it's very interesting to look at this. It's interesting. I'm going to say that I picked up a couple of things. And if you look at it, it's like watching people. And by the way, I have to say, when I do this, I'm just driving or I'm in my house. Like, I'm not actively trying to hack into anybody's system. That's not what I'm doing. I just have an antenna and things come my way. Like, I can't do anything about it. If things come to my antenna and my system happens to decrypt them, it's their fault. Yeah, what I'm saying, I'm not breaking any laws here. So anyhow, one thing that I saw, 2 things caught my attention, right? There's a lot of conversation going on regarding tires, like vehicle tires. And this is interesting because I just had that demo 2 days ago in which I mentioned this theory about maybe sensors in the wheels. It feels like it hit a nerve, okay? first of all. And secondly, it picked up a couple of people talking about different people, two different conversations with two different parties, but people talking about tires that are losing air and that need to be checked out. That would be the translation. These are conversations in Spanish, by the way. I don't know. It felt to me like too much of a coincidence, to be honest. And I started thinking about this because they didn't say replace the tire. They didn't say that or change the wheel. They said have them checked out. I think so. To make the story short, it made me think that maybe the device is in the valve of the tire, the valve stem, where like the thing where that goes out of the rim where you connect the air hose, and to inflate the tire, that valve could be the sensor. That occurred to me because this conversation was picked up a couple of times, not one, but twice. And of course, disclaimer, part of my, I'm not going to say that, but let me see how I frame this. I would say that I biased my decryption technique towards tires because I talked about that and I thought it could be a big topic. So of course, I'm using that as a seed to find the decryption keys, things related to tires, wheel, rims, discount tires. So of course, the detection is biased because I'm seeding the system with these topics, okay? But it decrypted, the decryption worked. So that means that it was a good guess in a way. So anyway, there's this conversation about tires losing air made me think that the device could be, the sensor could be actually the stem, the valve stem or stem valve. I don't know what's the name in English, but thinking about that, it would make sense because it would make the thing more scalable than I thought. My original theory was that they could modify the rims and embed the sensor in the rim, but that it's a heavy operation. And yes, China controls 40% of the steel production in the world. It would make sense that they could do that, but it seems like a too heavy operation carrying all these rims for millions of vehicles. But if it's in the valve, this is basically a cartridge that you put in the rim and you take it out. I haven't done experiments with this with data because I need to go to the office to do that. But I've been reviewing some footage, and it seems like the valves in some of these vehicles, let's say that are in interesting places or angles, okay? So it could be that it's the valve, the device that we're looking for, which would make the whole operation more scalable because then what they have to do is to produce the valves and ship them all over the world. So that's an interesting, it's an interesting theory, the valves, okay? Also, because I'm doing this thing, seeding the system with the topics of tires and wheels, my radio hobbyist, let's call it that way, system, picked up a few conversations in Spanish in which people seem to be talking about, I don't know how you say that in English, but when you sabotage a car by causing a flat tire, like with a sharp object. I don't know, in Spanish, if I translate how we would say it in Spanish, it would be like pinching a tire. So these people seem to be talking about pinching a tire, and they seem to be talking about taking action. And remember, I've been doing these rounds where I go to these places to take video of the vehicles of the Osado Cabello and the criminal network in these neighborhoods. So it occurred to me that maybe what they're talking about is about sabotaging my tires. And if they're going to sabotage the tires, they're going to sabotage the tires. There's nothing I can do. And I've gone through this before. Like in one occasion, they sabotaged, not the tires, the brake system of my truck while it was parked here in this house inside the garage. And I have the truck, and the brakes are sabotaged. the FBI or whatever authority wants to check them out, they can come and see it. It's proof, it's evidence. I know that I cannot stop that, but in case any authority is watching, please be on the lookout to see if you see anybody putting sharp objects on the path of my black SUV. Or I imagine they could do it at a store. If I go buy food, for example, they could put, I don't know, something sharp, like a blade or something like that, right behind the tire. So when I back out from the parking space, the tire gets damaged. That would prevent me from scanning their houses. Or maybe they're planning to do it if I enter one of these complexes that they have under control, because then it would be harder for anybody to see evidence of that. But to be honest, I think it's a stupid idea because for many reasons. Like first, the car has cameras. Like it would be recorded in the camera where the puncture happened. Secondly, this is an armored vehicle and the tires are armored. I think I have to, don't quote me on this, I have to check, but when I bought the vehicle, I think I saw that the tires were armored, like they could sustain gunfire. So I imagine blade wouldn't cut them. But again, don't quote me on that because I'm not completely sure. But I think I'm like 80% sure that the tires themselves are armored and could sustain, I think, 9mm fire or something like that. Anyhow, let's see what they do with that. But they seem to be planning something regarding sabotaging the tires of the truck, which also shows coordination. Like they are acting as a group to do something illegal to prevent me from exposing, which is a crime. So anyhow, I think it's just a stupid idea, but it was picked up by my system. So I wanted to mention it. Okay. Yeah, so on 0707, I did that round where I picked up the plates of the landscapers. After so many years of harassment from these landscapers, I finally have the plates. And I imagine these are the personal vehicles. Oh, another thing I want to say. I've noticed that what they seem to be doing is splitting the risk, okay? So what they're doing is, in the complexes, they tend to park their personal cars. And then the work, quote unquote, like the spy vehicles that they use to harass people and to steal data, they're parking them on an ensemble, like on big groups in different places. For example, the gym, the other place where they're parking. So on specifically on 0705, so the day after 4th of July, that's the day where I said I broke the record, is because I picked up something and I ended up going to this place, which is a water park, which makes sense. It's 5th of July, people will go to this water park, but the place, the parking lot, was probably 85% full of spy vehicles. Like the organic vehicles that were there were very few. And some of these vehicles, I even as a human remember them because there have been harassing incidents with these vehicles. I remember if somebody harassed you with a vehicle, you're going to remember. Some of those vehicles that to me are unforgettable because they harassed me with the vehicles were parked in that water park. Now, this is interesting, okay? In that water park, in the parking lot, and let me show you where it is. So it's in Katy Mills. So if you go to Katy Mills in Katy, and Katy Mills is controlled by this network. It's all of this thing is owned by Diosdado Cabello, probably. So here, they have this water park here. So that parking lot is this one. The entrance that I took was this one, 29.77913 minus 95.80199, okay? So all this parking lot was filled with cars. I think it was something like 600 cars in total. And this lot, this empty lot over here, was also used as an overflow parking lot. And I scanned everything in there. Like I didn't miss one vehicle. And what I was going to say is that around here, I would say, I would put it around here, 29.77965, minus 95.80253, they had something very interesting. It was very interesting to me. It was one of those police devices. This is like a police structure. Imagine it's like an extensible ladder, mechanized, okay? But it's very tall. It extends taller than an electricity post, something like that. And at the top, it has cameras, okay? And it has the logo of the police department and everything. It's a police thing. It was placed in the middle of the parking lot, it was extended, and it was recording, okay? The reason why this is interesting to me, because I have to wonder who put that police. This thing is full of spy cars. Yes, they're making it look like these people go into the water park, but I know that they just have the cars parked there while they're not working. And then when they are going to work, they come here, they park another car, and then they take the work vehicle to work, quote unquote. This police device is interesting to me because I see two options. I have to wonder about the presence of that device in there. What I mean by this is who put it there and what was the network's reaction to that device appearing in that parking lot, okay? So if I'm Diosdado Cabello or whoever he has commanding this thing here in Katy, and I see a police device that shows up in the parking lot, I would remove my 700 spy vehicles from there because otherwise they're gonna get all recorded. Unless I'm not worried if they get recorded because I have reasons to not be worried, okay? So I guess what I'm saying is if the real authorities have watched my previous videos, right, and wanted to record the people coming into this place and put that there, if it was not ordered by Diosdado Cabello or whoever he delegated this operation here in Katy to, the logical thing is that they would have removed the vehicles, but they didn't remove them. So I don't think that was put there by the legit authorities. I think that was put there by the police, but to actually help them watch the cars in case the FBI came looking for the cars or came looking for the person, for somebody. And this is, think about it. This is very important. This would mean that they're using the police to do counterintelligence on the FBI. Imagine that. This has to stop. There has to be an end to this. Okay. So that's the water park. Now, next to that water park, there's these two apartment complexes. The most prominent one is this one, the Cape at Grand Harbor, 24758 Grand Harbor Drive, Katy, Texas, 77494. These are recorded in the Call Mobile Raw channel. And there's a playlist in there. If you go to the channel, click on playlist, this one that says 2025-0705 Katy Mills Water Park and 4 Docker hoods. This playlist contains those videos. Let me see if I can find one video that shows that Docker hood that I'm describing. Yeah, this one. So here you have all the cars that are inside of that Docker hood. Now, one thing I want to mention, this is a very prominent Docker hood, and the place where they have that observation outpost of the 7 is behind this dumpster. And this, you can see the cars parked next to this structure. These are like the offices with no windows that I showed in the previous demo. The coordinates of that is 29.77888 minus 95.80075. And the other thing that is interesting is that if you watch this video, you will see I spent probably 40 minutes inside or 30 minutes inside that complex. And during all the time, the system recorded, I don't know, maybe 700 vehicles. You cannot see one face in the 30 minutes time window. Not one baby, not even nothing, not even a dog. This is obviously synthetic. This shows coordination. Like they get the order, don't go out. Don't, because you're going to get recorded. So they're coordinating the entire complex because you cannot see one face. You only see these vehicles with the dark windows like following me, but you don't see an actual person anywhere. And this is not, if this street where I am right now has only like 7 houses or 10 houses, I don't know. If I go out for 10 minutes, I'm sure I will see at least one person, one face at least, or one dog, something living. But you see the footage, and I'm publishing footage here of 3 different cameras, 360 degrees angle. And during all that time, you don't see one living being. This isn't synthetic. And that confirms that this is a very important place. Now, the other one is the one next to it, this one. The Camden Grand Harbor Apartments on 24757 Grand Harbor Drive, Katy, Texas 77494. Same story. Although here I saw 3 different people in 25, 30 minutes. And if you look at the bigger scheme of things, you see how both complexes are protected by the water park, the empty lots, and the Katy Mills as a whole. Like, this is the buffer zone, because this is where the important agents and even those offices are. So they have to protect that. So this is a very important area for the network in general. That thought of the agents hiding in their apartments and not going out at all, nobody moves when the call mobile arrives, made me think about something I've talked about multiple times, which is that what they provide to the agents is impunity and anonymity. Those two things make people behave in ways outside of the normal societal rules because they feel like they're not accountable for their actions. And they feel like they're acting as a group. So even if the action gets discovered, they feel like they will not be personally held accountable because the group is who committed the crime, not them personally. That they think that way. So mentioning all these because, and this is risking to state the obvious, but thinking about how that is implemented, obviously, 2 important parts of this setup, and I'm not talking necessarily about the US, but in general, in every single country, it's going to be the same. So the department that controls the license plates, because with that, they can control the characters on the license plates, the numbers, the series, they can control many things. They can change the license plates, change the registration, sell the cars. They can do all sorts of tricks. But for that, it requires that they control the organism that controls the license plates, that regulates the vehicle transit in that area. In the case of Texas, this is called the DPS. It's heavily marked in the index. Important people tied to the DPS that have roles, official roles in the DPS, are heavily marked in the index. So this is important. The second part is the identities. These fake identities they create with the funny names and the religious names and the familiar names part and all those things are only possible because somebody has turned an official entity that regulates the issuance of identity documents somewhere, doesn't have to be here, but somewhere, to issue fake documents on fake names. So in the case of Venezuela, this entity is called the SAIME, SAIME. So this is like the government dependency or organism that regulates the issuance of your national ID card, your passport, all those things, as a Venezuelan. And I'm mentioning Venezuela because they have more than 50,000 Venezuelans here in Katy with fake names. So all this is possible because of 2 people. One is called Guson Fernando Flores, and I don't know if that Flores has any relation to Celia Flores and the narco nephews, but could be. And he's the director of the SAIME, this organism in Venezuela that is issuing these hundreds of thousands of fake passports for these people to commit crimes around the world. And the previous director that they just replaced a few months ago was somebody called Gustavo Vizcaino Hill. And that one I reported to the IRS in the Form 211. The new one is not in the Form 211. But I'm mentioning them because obviously all this is possible because of their actions. If they weren't issuing those fake passports, these agents wouldn't feel anonymous and they wouldn't be committing crimes, or they would be less likely to commit crimes. And they would be easier to track. The DPS, Dickinson, Freeman, Martin, Stephen McCraw, and the SAIME in Venezuela are crucial pieces for this to work. Talking of official entities, the Houston Transit Authority, which is called rightmetro.org, also is heavily controlled by this network, is heavily flagged. and the places that like where they maintain the buses for the Katy ISD, the school district of Katy, they have these facilities where they do maintenance themselves so they have their own mechanics to do maintenance to the buses. All those places where they park the buses and where the buses are receive maintenance are marked in the index as well. Okay, and now I'm going to talk about something else. It's a bit off topic, but I'm going to say it because I think it could bring liability to Diosdado Cabello and to specific people here that could talk. Okay, and this is a topic, and I guess I have to say I feel conflicted about saying this because it will affect people that maybe have no other way. I don't know, but I have to say it. So this is the observation. They have a scheme here going on, and they have had it for years here in Katy and Darius County. Okay, they have had it for years. And in one instance, I reported this to the authorities, but nothing was done because I reported it because I felt it was wrong. So the scheme is with something they call the golden card insurance. And I don't know what that, I don't know the exact name. That's what they call it, the golden card of Harris County. I don't know the exact name because I don't use it and I'm not even eligible and my parents are not here. But from what I understand, and please take this with a grain of salt because this is something that I'm not familiar with. I've heard about the scam or the scheme, but I don't know exactly the mechanics. Okay. So Harris County has this thing called the golden card. That's what they call it, which is an insurance for people that, as I understand, have certain age, older people that don't have the means to pay for healthcare. It's a social program for people that are older that live in Harris County and that meet certain income criteria to qualify. The household has to earn less than X amount of money. It's basically a free insurance, okay? Or very affordable insurance, medical insurance. So the scheme is that the agents that are in Katy, and this is done by the agents that are in Katy, because the ones that live in Harris County maybe don't need to do this because they're not reporting their crypto income. But the ones that are in Katy have the problem that Katy doesn't have an equivalent program to that. Fort Bend doesn't have it, Fort Bend County, okay? And I've heard this fierce hand from Penelope Suarez. She explained to me all this. What I'm saying now, she told me. I'm not guessing here anything. So the scheme in the case of Penelope Suarez and her mother, I don't recall what the mother is called. I have her in the system, but I don't have access from here, so I don't. Cointa is the sister. Iris Bracho is the mother. So the mother, she's an older woman, 70 years old. I don't know, 75. I don't know. And she has some health problems, and she has to get health care, right? So what they did is that there is a person that works in this program in the Harris County Gold Card thing. And this woman, I have the name somewhere because, as I said, I reported this. I called them. They have this. Harris County has a phone number where you can report wrongdoing and waste and corruption and things like that. And I reported this. I think it was probably 2020. I made a call. It was an anonymous call, an anonymous tip, but it wasn't investigated. And I know it wasn't investigated because after that, Iris Bracho received multiple operations and healthcare procedures that costed hundreds of thousands of dollars. So she still had the insurance. Anyhow, Penelope told me that there was a woman in that gold car thing. She described her as, I think, a Central American person, a woman from El Salvador or Nicaragua. I don't recall exactly where, but from somewhere around there. Was not Mexico. Was something like El Salvador or Guatemala or something like that. And what this person would do would basically instruct them to change the address of the insured to somewhere in Harris County. Okay, and for that, Penelope Suarez used the address of the Vilche cousin. What's her name? the oncologist, Dr. Magella. Magella meant Vilches. So they applied setting the address of Iris Bracho as if she was living with Magella to meet the requirement of residing in Harris County, of being a resident of Harris County, okay? And I mention this because I know Magella is an agent, and if this is corroborated and it's proven that they did this, it could be ammunition to get them to talk and confess the other crimes that involve Diosdado Cabello. So all I'm saying is I'm not trying to hurt Penelope or Magella. I'm trying to bring Diosdado to justice and bring him to the US. So anyhow, Magella provided the address. The woman in the gold card thing provided the approval of the application. I don't know if all the other criteria was met really or not, but I know that this woman provides the approval, and Penelope told me that they paid this woman to provide the approval. So that's the scheme. So basically, it's a way for the older parents of the agents living in Katy to get free health insurance, which is silly. These people, there's properties that are connected to Penelope that are worth millions of dollars. What was the need to do this? Couldn't they just pay for the? I don't know. It's just one of those things that you look at it in retrospective and it's stupid. If Diosdado Cabello is already paying you millions of dollars, pay for the operation. Like, why defraud the county and expose yourself and your family and the entire network to save $50,000? It's stupid. It's a third world mentality. That's the problem. Anyhow, that probably is a lot of ammunition, legal ammunition for the free world, to get them to talk. They say who paid them and who is the sponsor in all this. Okay, so now let's go to another more general topic, and it's about, I was thinking about the scheme with the credit cards and the thing that we talked about. I'm not going to repeat all I said, it's in the previous two videos, but the schemes with the Shell gas stations, the Bookies gas stations, that they send the agents to fill up the tanks of their cars at the same time to exercise synthetic pressure on the market to inflate the oil prices. And at the same time, they pay with a credit card, allegedly, and then they allegedly get refunded in cryptocurrency by Diosdado Cabello using money from the drug trade. And that way, the money is laundered, and at the same time, the oil prices increase. Okay. So this got me thinking about subscriptions. And I have a prototype already done, but I haven't run it because I'm not going to run it from this house, because then they would be able to reverse engineer my systems. But basically what my prototype, and I'm mentioning this in case anybody is interested in running a similar experiment, is looking for, this system is looking for companies that are controlled by people listed in the Form 211 that I submitted to the IRS between the page 905 and the page 1000, the most prominent people. So from that subset, looking for people that control companies that run subscription services at the highest scale. Like, for example, Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos runs multiple subscription services like the Amazon Prime, the Washington Post subscription, and a few others, Ring or Blink subscriptions. So the idea is try to find, and okay, so I can find candidates, but I cannot really get to the end of this investigative idea because I don't have access to the subscription data. But if I had access to the subscription data, what I would look for are two things. One, coordination with the credit cards. Is that the subscribers of this, what percentage of the subscribers of these subscriptions are marked in the index? Okay, that their billing address in their credit cards is marked in the index. Yes, the billing addresses. That's how they do it. That's how they do it. Remember, yeah. So in the last session, I hypothesized that they could use the credit card processors to track the transactions. And of course, the way they track them is simple because they have the geo index. They know who the agents are, and they have the billing addresses of the credit card. So all they have to do, they don't even need the names of the agents. What they need is the addresses, and they match them back to the geo index in the same way that I do it. And if they match, then that's just a transaction that is laundering money. And then they refund the agent for that amount. That's probably how they do it. Back to the subscriptions, I would look for subscribers the data to see what percentage of subscribers are marked in the index. That's number one. Number two is, what are the credit cards used by these subscribers? It's not going to be one credit card, but it's probably going to be a small set, 5, 6 different credit cards, the credit card brands or companies. Chase, United, like the United, because it has the word United, is a prime candidate for that experiment. And see what percentage of them are agents. Because if you run a subscription service and it turns out that 70% of your subscribers, sorry, I keep saying it in Spanish, of your subscribers are agents of the network, it's reasonable to think that this is a money laundering mechanism. The other thing I would look at if I was an investigator and had access to the data would be the usage of the subscription. Are they really using it? Are people reading the Washington Post, the people that are subscribed within that subset of agents? Say that you find a subset of people that are subscribed to the Washington Post that are also agents in the network, and they have a subscription to the Washington Post. Is that they're really using them, that they're really using their subscriptions, or they just have them just to make the expenditure? So it seems to me like there's multiple avenues in there to prove or to see if there is coordination. Because in all these subscriptions, these are ideal mechanisms for this because these are recurrent, small amounts of money, transactions that never get declined by design. Hasn't it happened to you that you have a credit card and you have a subscription in there? You cancel the credit card because it gets stolen or cloned or whatever, but the subscription keeps coming in. It's amazing. Like even if you cannot do anything about it, you call the bank and the subscription still keeps coming in. So that system of subscription is so highly embedded into the credit card payment processing that somehow they made it so that you cannot cancel it in any way. It's very difficult to get rid of the subscriptions, even if you call the bank. So maybe that's why. Maybe that's why. So if you lose the credit card, it doesn't cause a disruption to this pipeline. So these are small amounts of money that never get declined, and they're very difficult to trace because an investigator is not going to be looking for a $12.99 transaction on a credit card statement. But the problem is that it's not one, it could be, I don't know, 20 million transactions of that amount per month. And in aggregate, it would be $200 million per month. It would be $2.4 billion per year just in one subscription. So just one type of subscription. And if you do this 100 times, 1,000 times in different countries, it's an immense amount of money. So watch out for the subscriptions. Okay. And now for my last trick, I want to talk about something really important. Okay. So let's talk about nuclear power. This is a topic I love. I don't know much about nuclear power, but seeing the way they're targeting nuclear facilities and nuclear research centers, it's obviously a big thing. And it's interesting to me within this campaign that I'm advancing, because I know that nuclear power is heavily regulated because of the way it could be used to harm large numbers of people. And there's international treaties and frameworks to regulate this. And they're targeting these facilities. There's probably international liability for Josaro Cabello personally here. In the Spy Health dashboard, and I'm going to present this. So if you click on Earth, on this tab that says Earth, it will basically open the dashboard, and then it has tabs. Okay, the second tab is called the Churchill. This is a name I gave to this tab or this piece of technology to honor Sir Churchill out of admiration for him. And in this tab, so it has the paramilitary locations, okay? And in that, there is this yellow filter that has locations that are already like pre-computed or clustered together, okay? And there are very interesting things in here, okay? So for example, here, I have one that says nuclear power. And if you see the heat map, it basically maps to a lot of locations in places like New Jersey, where they're basically targeting power plants in the US, in New Jersey, that are nuclear plants, okay? And they have them under heavy surveillance, very heavy surveillance. So probably a lot of liability in that. And there's also things like, if you go to, what is the other one? Okay, let me go over here. So if you go to, there is a tab in here that says East Asia. What is it? By the way, the NASA JPL is in here, you know, where Francisco Godoy used to work. By the way, speaking of Francisco Godoy, something strange happened last week, and I've been meaning to mention it. I'll mention it now. Francisco Godoy got tagged as a doctor in the last run of the pipeline that I ran last week. It's strange because he worked for Google as an engineer, but the pipeline tagged him as a doctor. And I don't know why. I'm mentioning it because if the pipeline is right, I don't know. I don't know if it's right. But if he's really a doctor, it could be, right? Like these people change their reality. They don't care. They could transform somebody into anything. But if he really is a doctor and he's working for Google as an engineer, that has to have collaboration from Google internally. And also, in one occasion, he introduced me to a doctor, a Venezuelan doctor. I didn't understand. To this day, I don't understand what was the angle with that. But he introduced me to a Venezuelan doctor, a man more or less my age, as a friend. So I got to know this guy. But I don't know why he did that. But anyhow, I'm trying to find. So Eurasia, which we talked about before, is here, and this is basically the Ukraine, Russia, Belarus border. But there's another one here that says, here it is, East Asia, okay? So if you look at the heat map, it's interesting because they're basically targeting South Korea as a target. Like I can tell, and I'm not gonna get into details how I can tell that, but if one does the analysis, it's obvious that in this, South Korea is a target, okay? And they're basically taking data from South Korea and taking it to North Korea, China, and Russia. And you can see the way they're doing that. And all this data comes from the UN index. These are not guesses. So this is hard data coming from their own database that was given to me by Gisaro Cabello and Vladimir Padrino Lopez. So they're basically stealing nuclear secrets from South Korea and giving them to North Korea, which is dangerous, and to China and Russia, okay? And if you look at the, just to give you an example, this is just to open your appetite in a way. If you take the highest, and just in this subset, and remember, this is just a subset that is marked with East Asia, okay? If you take this point and you go to mass.google.com, if you open that point that I had, the top point in the East Asia sub-dashboard, is this. And it's in a mountain range, and this pattern we've seen before, like the mountain range in the Tibet, the mountain range near Caracas, Venezuela, the mountain range near Las Vegas. Like the mountain ranges, the crest is always a prime spot for this. But if you do this, you'll see this is very close to a nuclear plant. So there are a lot. It's not a nuclear plant. It's a nuclear institute of research institute. So this mountain range where they have that super prominent point is basically at the same distance from multiple points of interest related to nuclear power. Okay. So in the case of South Korea, the angle seems to be politics and nuclear power. In North Korea, they have a lot of points marked in the index that fall exactly on the parking lots of the known nuclear research facilities and nuclear facilities. Okay, so in North Korea, and I don't know much about this because it's first, it's a country that is very close, and secondly, I have no background on this. But from what I understand, there are certain facilities in North Korea that are known, that nuclear facilities or nuclear research or facilities that are known and have been discovered or have been disclosed on purpose. But there are others that are secret. So I can only tell you about the ones that are public knowledge. All of them are marked in the index. But of course, I imagine the ones that are secret are also marked in the index. So this could be a way to understand where they really are. So that's that. Now let's see if we can go back to spyhell.org. Yes, it shows. Okay. So when I again open the Earth tab, the Earth tab is where you have this dashboard that is visual with the heat maps. And you can see things like the Jeffrey Epstein Island or things like that. The CBS headquarters is in here as well. There's a lot of interesting. Look at that. The Warsaw to Minsk route. This is super interesting. If anybody watches this video and knows anybody in the US military, because this is really a topic for the military, like these things that I'm talking about here are really the military applications. See how they put yeah, this is beautiful. How they deploy the points, right, in the settlements that fall in the major intersection of the major roads. This is a military operation. You can see it. There's no question about that. And so this is how they attack countries in Eastern Europe, like Ukraine. Okay, what else? What else interesting can I show you here? Yes, Beijing, Poyang. This is another data corridor that goes from Beijing to Poyang. And you can see how it works. You can see the jump points. And again, I want to emphasize this. I mentioned a few minutes ago how I'm able to catch signals and decrypt small streams of data if I have a seed of something that I know they could be talking about. If I'm able to do this, right? Me being an untrained individual in radio frequency with limited resources, imprisoned in this house by them, I cannot imagine what the NSA could do to them if they get this information. So please, if you know anybody at the NSA, send them this video because I'm sure they will be full with ideas on how to intercept everything that they're talking about. Yes, so East Asia, oh, Pyongyang is here. So here, yes, see. So here, if somebody watching this has access to somebody who's originally from Pyongyang, there must be somebody. They can probably tell you, right? What's interesting? Oh, one thing that's interesting here is the embassies. Particularly the Egyptian embassy in Pyongyang is marked in the index very high, with very high paramilitary score. So anyhow, I could be talking about this for hours, but I guess the point I'm trying to convey is that there's a heavy focus of this network on stealing nuclear secrets and even weaponizing nuclear facilities, even if they are decommissioned. We'll give an example. The vault that covers the failed nuclear reactor at Chernobyl is marked in this GEO index with a high paramilitary score. They have a point in the vault of the Chernobyl reactor, which is in Ukraine. I'm speculating here, but I imagine, knowing how they operate and how they think, that if they see that they're losing the war, they could think of causing a disaster by blowing the cover or something like that, blowing that vault. That would cause a national emergency in Ukraine. And it would allow them to cause more damage and also retreat with dignity. Oh, no, we can't fight because now there's a nuclear emergency. If they see they're losing, of course. When they see that they're losing, they backpedal, and I've seen this firsthand in many instances. So if anybody is watching this, please be careful with that vault because they may blow it. They may blow that cover. I don't know anything about that field. I don't know what the consequences would be, but I imagine that I saw the documentary on Netflix, then I saw that thousands of people had to die to build that vault. So people knew that they were going to die, but they still went and worked on that for a couple of years, I don't know how long, to build that, giving their lives. So that important is that vault. If it gets blown away, I imagine it would be a disaster. So please be careful with that vault. I think this is a good time to end this session. So as always, I want to thank you, and a message for Diosdado. Victory. See you on the next one.